Good evening, everybody. It's 5:30, and we're going to go ahead and get started with our community meeting here. Good evening. My name is Ian Larkin. I'm the unit chief for CAL FIRE here in the San Mateo-Santa Cruz unit. And I would like to welcome you all to the first of two CAL FIRE CZU Lightning Complex community meetings that are being held. Tonight's meeting will be for Supervisorial District 3, focusing on the Bonnie Doon, Davenport, and North Coast areas. And the second meeting will be held tomorrow night for Supervisorial District 5, focusing on the San Lorenzo Valley, incorporating the communities of Felton, Ben Lomond, Brookdale, Boulder Creek, Zayante, and Scotts Valley. If you are from another area of the county, I just want to let you know this same information will be provided at each of the meetings. I would like to start by taking a moment of silence in recognition of Mr. Tad Jones, who tragically lost his life during the CZU Lightning Complex fire. All right, thank you for that moment of silence. I would like to first apologize to you all for how long it's taken CAL FIRE to hold these community meetings. Normally, we would hold these meetings for the community in person and prior to the control of the incident to allow our CAL FIRE incident management team to participate in this important meeting. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we were unable to meet those goals. We came to a realization that we had come to the point that we could no longer wait any longer to hold these meetings. So we are here tonight to provide this meeting. The meeting will be to provide you all an incident summary of the incident, as well as some lessons learned. This is not meant to be an after-action review. Our presentation is approximately 50 minutes in length, and we'll conclude at the conclusion of the presentation. We will have an answer and question period. We're all asking everybody to hold any questions you may have until the end of the presentation. I know these are challenging times for us all, and I know you have lost, all of you that have lost homes, your emotions are high, and this is a very difficult time for us all. I would like to say we sympathize with you for your losses, and we too have several firefighters who have suffered the same losses as you with the loss of your homes. I'm requesting that everybody be courteous as we move through this presentation and during our questions and answers, so we can get as many questions answered as possible. I do want to remind everybody that this is a live meeting broadcast via community TV. With that, I would like to introduce our panelists for tonight. Tonight with me, I have CAL FIRE Deputy Chief Nate Armstrong, who will be co-presenting. I also have CAL FIRE Deputy Chief Jonathan Cox, who will be helped to facilitate the question and answer session. From the Sheriff's Department, I have Sheriff Jim Hart. And from the Santa Cruz County Office of Emergency Services, I have Michael Beaton. Supervisor Coonerty is listening into the presentation, but will not participate as a panelist. I would also like to thank Community TV for this venue to deliver this meeting to you, the public. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started with our presentation. Okay, if I can get the slide to move. Okay, all right. I would like to start with just painting a quick overall picture for you all of the event. At approximately 3 a.m. on August 16th, 2020, a lightning storm made landfall and generated approximately 12,000 plus lightning strikes across California. This caused more than 585 fires across the state. And of those fires, 24 of those fires became major incidents. 300 plus lightning strikes hit San Mateo and Santa Cruz County, causing 27 confirmed fires between the two counties. CZU on a daily basis staffs 13 fire engines, 2 bulldozers, 3 fire crews, and we have 4 shift battalion chiefs that act as overhead for us in our operational capacity to cover approximately 455,000 acres of state responsibility area between the two counties. So leading up to this event, we have been experiencing significant drought conditions over the last several years, as well as our recent weather had been producing very high temperatures in excess of 100 degrees, as well as low humidities through as low as 4% over the weeks leading up to the fires. And then in addition to that, we had no coastal influence. There was no fog that had come into the area to help us with that relative humidity recovery. Before I turn the presentation over to Deputy Chief Armstrong, I would like to take a quick moment to make it clear to everybody that the decision and actions that we take are based on three main priorities. And these priorities are in order: the protection of life, property, and the environment. Those are how we base our decisions. The last thing I want for anyone in this incident was for anybody to die or for anybody to lose their home. That was the absolute last thing that we wanted to occur. So I just want to make that very clear to everybody. With that, I will turn it over to Chief Armstrong.
Thank you, Chief, and good evening to everyone. As Chief Larkin said, my name is Nate Armstrong. I'm a Deputy Chief for CAL FIRE here in the San Mateo-Santa Cruz unit. I oversee the state operations as well as overall operations within Santa Cruz County. And I'll be talking with you folks for a little bit about our operations and basically what occurred in the first couple of days of these fires. So starting out, actually starts out on Saturday, August 15th. We knew this weather was coming. We just didn't know exactly how bad it was going to be. What you should be seeing on your screen, and I'm not going to go into great detail of what the lightning plan is, but we do have a pre-designated plan. We call it an LCA, or Lightning Coordination Area Plan, that we use for instance just as this. And it's a way for us to divide out geographical areas and be able to go search out every single lightning strike and see if a fire has occurred and so forth. So like I say, on the 15th, we knew the weather was coming. Our duty chief just reiterated this plan to the whole unit, told everybody to get their eyes on it, one more time and be fresh with it because it was likely going to be utilized. The plan was absolutely utilized. It was utilized to a T. Unfortunately, we could never really get to full implementation because we were so limited on resources, which you're going to hear several times throughout this, I'm sure. So that's it on the lightning plan. I just want to touch on it really briefly and go into what we saw when we woke up on Sunday morning, August 16th. So as Chief indicated, that morning of the 16th, we ended up with 27 known fires in the unit. And like he said, we only have 13 CAL FIRE engines within San Mateo and Santa Cruz unit. So you can see where that was kind of taxing. And as you can see there, we got hundreds of 911 calls. For every little plume of smoke that you might see, we get dozens of 911 calls. So you can imagine with how visible some of these were and everything. As more people woke up that morning, we just got more and more inundation of those calls. So our system was totally strained. Very early in the morning, about 6 o'clock, we held all of our personnel on duty, meaning nobody could go off. And that would remain in force for well over a month, that our folks just weren't going home. So it was a couple of months before some people had a single day off. Also that day, we called out all of our volunteer companies. Within Santa Cruz County Fire, there's 5 volunteer companies throughout the county that CAL FIRE manages. And we called all those companies to staff any equipment that they had available. We also staffed every additional reserve and county-funded piece of apparatus at our disposal to the point that we were pretty much out of engines to put folks on, and we had folks in pickup trucks with hand tools and pumps just going out to be able to make first access to these fires and assess what we truly had. Next slide there, Chief. So what I want to show you folks with this map is basically the 24 fires that most people never knew existed. So you won't see the couple of major fires, or sorry, the couple of fires on here that grew to be the large CZU August complex, or yeah, sorry, August lightning complex that many of you know. You can see the naming of those fires, some 5-3, et cetera. That's all within that LCA plan. And that's just a way for us to track those fires. So like I say, most of the fires, those 27 fires were extinguished or kept very small on that first day. A couple of fires to note here is the 3-11. That 3-11 was in the Zayani area. It was a fairly well-populated area, a lot of homes. That fire was a little better than 10 acres, and we were able to contain that fire without any loss of life or property. The 3-10 was up in the China Grade area, you may see that. And that again was a pretty much immediate threat to property, but we had no loss because that was extinguished that first day. So the unfortunate thing about having this number of fires, we can't just put them out and walk away. So they still continue to have a bit of a resource drain, even as we extinguish them that first day or within the first 24 hours. One fire that I actually don't have on this map that probably should be was the Waranella fire. You'll see it in a couple of other places. I say that it probably should be on here because we contained that fire in about the first 24 hours. And like I said, we just had it in a patrol status. So of the 27 fires, 24 of them were extinguished within the first 24 hours. One other thing I want to touch on while we're here, since you see all those different fire names and stuff, is the name of this fire. We've heard a lot of questions. Why is it called the CZU Lightning Complex? And so I just want to break it down really quick before we move on. There's 21 operational units of CAL FIRE throughout the state. Here in Santa Cruz County as part of the San Mateo-Santa Cruz unit. And all of those units have a 3-letter identifier. So ours here is CZU. Please don't ask why. I don't understand why, it just is. So when we have a large fire, or many fires rather, managed under one structure, such as we had here with 27 plus or around 27 fires, it's called a complex. And so we needed one name. And so that's why you see the CZU August Lightning Complex. So hopefully I didn't spend too much time on that. I just want to answer the question because I know it continually comes up. Chief, if you can move to the next slide, please. So this photo is from San Mateo County looking south down Highway 1. It's looking at the Waddell fire. If you guys aren't familiar with the Waddell fire, it was in the Waddell Creek drainage near Rancho del Oso, near the county line for Santa Cruz County and San Mateo County on the North Santa Cruz County coast. This fire was actually the closest, you'll see it on a map in a little while. This was the closest fire to the last chance community. And while it wasn't an immediate threat, it was definitely the highest probability of a threat to the last chance community. Now, we did have folks on that fire continuously from the 16th on, and that fire was actually pretty close to being contained on the 18th when the other fires blew up and we had to pull the resources off of the Waddell fire to go help fire in the last chance community. Next slide there, Chief. So on Monday the 17th, like I said, we had extinguished or contained most of the fires the day before. On Monday the 17th, we were really dealing with 5 large fires. And I'll show them all to you in a second. One of those was the Waranella, which I previously mentioned. That was basically just north of the community of Davenport, basically the largest threat at that time to the communities of Davenport and Bonnie Doon. And then you had the Waddell that I was just showing you. And then there were 3 other fires. You're looking at 2 of them in the graphic there that were pretty deep in uninhabited, inaccessible areas of redwood forest in southern San Mateo County. So of these 5 large fires, we put 80 plus acres each because 80 was about the smallest. That Warrenella was about 120. Each of these ones was a little over 100. I forget the total for that day. We'll have it in another graphic, but essentially on the 17th, we were looking at a total of about 800 acres. Those were all in heavy timber areas with very slow rates of spread. And by rates of spread, I mean, it was just, they were backing down in kind of timber understories, not burning the treetops or anything, just backing, and should have been easily controlled if we could eventually get the resources needed. Now on this map here, this was actually one of our field supervisors, a branch director, his working map for the incident. And you can see that pink outline that follows kind of some roads and some topographic features. That was his plan, his containment plan, to capture those two fires. The critical thing for that is you need the resources to do it, which we were incredibly limited on, and we continued to place large resource requests. They just weren't necessarily available. Next slide, Chief. So here's an aerial shot from Monday, August 17th. Like I was just saying, it was an understory burn. And what we mean by that is that's all that ground litter, all that dead material that's been falling out of trees for dozens, bordering on 100 years, because a lot of this area, we don't have recorded fire history, meaning we don't have any record of any wildfires burning in those areas. So we know that there was a lot of dead fuel on the ground. However, like you see the next note, there is no crowning. And what we mean by crowning is when the fire starts burning in the treetops. So once it starts getting in the treetops, that's like the fire activity that many folks saw late night of the 18th, early morning 19th, and still moving into the evening of the 19th. There is no controlling those crown fires. But what we had here on the 17th still was fairly manageable. The problem with the 17th was that some of the other fires in the Bay Area exploded. They grew exponentially. And those were in the Santa Clara and North Bay areas. Particularly the fires in the North Bay were in well-populated areas with immediate threats to life. And so they, unfortunately for us, got a majority of semi-available resources, and it left us kind of stranded for some resources still on the 17th. Next slide, Chief. So on the 17th, we did get a couple of helicopters assigned to the fire. We were able to fly the fire and really finally get a good aerial reconnaissance of what exactly we had. That day, we requested a Type 3 incident management team. That's the South Bay Incident Management Team that's made up of local cooperators. It's a multi-agency response. And what that did for us was just allow us, assist us in establishing some of the logistical functions, some of the long-term planning, some of the tracking of resources as this incident would continue to grow. We did continue to request additional resources. Between the 17th and 18th, we had outstanding resource requests for over 150 fire engines that would go unfilled. That was the bare minimum that we knew we needed in addition to what we already had to control these fires, but we just wouldn't get it. Also on this day, we began to, we saw that it was going to be a long-term event. And so we started to integrate with the county administrative folks for both San Mateo and Santa Cruz County, began to have dialogue with the sheriff's offices and with local OESs. But still on this day, at least in the morning and up to midday, that fire was still moving at a very slow rate of spread. Next slide, Chief. So here is a map of 5 fires. And you can see, hopefully you can see all the way down there at the bottom, the Warrenella fire, which I previously mentioned. We contain that to about 120 acres. And like I said, that was off Warrenella Road, just north of the community of Davenport and Bonnie Doon. You can see that Waddell fire on the coast. Those 3 other little blobs that you see, the 5-14, 5-15, and 5-18, those And you can see that yellow line is the county line. Those three fires are the ones that would grow together to be the large fire that everybody knows. And on the 17th, those were still fairly small and sitting fairly well within San Mateo County, not near any populated areas of Santa Cruz County just yet. Next slide, Chief. So here's a slightly different map of those same fires. And just a couple of things on here. So you can see 861 total acres at that point on the 17th. And you can also see, at least for those two fires in the furthest north, this is a topographic relief map. You can kind of see some land features like mountains. Those two fires sitting in the north were sitting on the lee side of that ridge top, and they were just slowly burning downhill. Like I said, slowly burning that understory away. I do want you guys to imprint this map if you can, though, because we're going to show you this same map a couple other times throughout this presentation, and it'll kind of show you the progression of the fire as a whole. Next slide, Chief. So this is a photo late day in the 17th. I think this was probably about one of the last flights the helicopter was able to make that day. And we see a couple of things from this. From the smoke, we see that it's still that easy kind of gradual understory burn. But the one thing that we do see in this is the winds are starting to pick up. They're starting to lay down that smoke, really bend it over. That does a few things for us. It makes fighting fire with the aircraft difficult when they can't see and can't get in. But it also is a sign of what was to come with some of the weather. And you'll see in future slides, as the fire picked up in intensity, you'll see that smoke change quite a bit. So with that, Chief, I think we'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Chief Armstrong. So this kind of brings us to the next day on the 18th. On the 18th, the three largest fires that Chief Armstrong was talking about that you saw up in the San Mateo County area continued to burn towards the south. Those fires were mostly burning in the understory under the canopy. But as things started to progress that day, those fires started to burn with greater intensity, and that total acreage growth was starting to cause some concerns. As Chief Armstrong had mentioned, that we had already requested a Type 3 incident management team to come in and assist us with logistical and planning needs. So at this point, when we started to see this increase, we went ahead and made a request to CAL FIRE for a Type 1 incident management team to come in and assist the Type 3 and build that larger organization to meet the complexity that we felt could be coming in the near future. One thing I do want to point out is the CAL FIRE has 6 incident management teams statewide, and we already had multiple teams deployed, and we weren't really confident at the level of deployment we were going to get from the team. And to our surprise, when the team arrived, it came with 95% of its total strength. So that was a great asset and help to us when that team did arrive. As the day progressed on the 18th, that fire, as I said, that fire activity started to increase. Crews out in the field started reporting that they were starting to see spot fires outside of the main fire perimeter that was there, which was a cause for concern. These fires had still been burning primarily in the understory. We had maybe the isolated tree that would torch, but nothing in the crowns that was causing any concern for a significant crown run. As the 18th continued on, our map that showed that morning, and this was a map you saw earlier, that growth that we saw from the 17th to the 18th was approximately 4,709 acres. It was really difficult to be able to see under the smoke to actually see the actual fire line, but these were the best estimations that we could get from aerial aircraft, resources on the ground, that were reporting back to us the location and the intensity that this fire was burning. So for the 18th, our total acreage at that time was about 5,500 acres. The Warnella fire had little to no growth between the 17th and 18th. And at that point, the Waddell fire had resources committed to it. And one thing to point out about the Waddell fire is the accessibility, even though it sat right on Highway 1, was very difficult. There's no roads into there. There's only a few small trails to be able to access that area. And with that, we were having to actually use dozers to build containment line into that fire. So as the day progressed on the 18th, the fire continued to push south, as I said. At this point, we entered into unified command with the sheriff's department from both counties, just as a precursor to potential events of having to do evacuations and that sort. So we wanted to make sure that we had that relationship established and that we were ready to pull the trigger if we needed to. So this is just to give you a little bit of perspective of what the visual of the fire was. This is a picture from Cloverdale Road looking south at about 3:20 in the afternoon. As you can see, they're starting to get a pretty good buildup. Fire intensity was increasing and starting to build. This next picture is just another depiction looking south from Pillar Point Harbor in Half Moon Bay. Picture really gives us a depiction of how fast the intensity was growing. This was just later in the afternoon, just before dusk, when the sun was really starting to go down. So it shows you how the intensity of that fire at night was actually burning better at night than it was during the day. As we progressed into that evening, evacuation orders had been initiated in Boulder Creek and Bonnie Doon and the North Coast. As you can see this picture from Highway 236 looking back towards the north, you can see that fire coming down out of that area, burning down towards Big Basin. And then the picture on the right is just another picture from Pillar Point Harbor that kind of depicts what was happening in that rapid increase of fire activity. I do want to point out, we had resources assigned to this fire from the very beginning. We had folks that had worked double shift. They'd been out there since 3 o'clock August 16th, that Sunday morning, from the very beginning, had worked all the way through Sunday into Monday and into Tuesday morning on the 18th. So we had double and triple shifted a lot of resources. And due to fatigue, we needed, and for our firefighter safety, we needed to get these guys a little bit of rest. So we had some of these folks be able to go bed down to get some rest until we could get additional resources. We ended up having to wake those folks out of bed mid-evening to put them back out onto the fire line to deal with the increased fire behavior that we saw that had a drastic change in the progression of the fire throughout that rest of that evening on the 18th, going into the 19th. I'm going to show you just a quick little video. This is some of those resources that were woken up out of bed were sent into Big Basin State Park to assist state parks in evacuating the park when the fire had come down to. As this video rolls through, I just want to give you a depiction of it. The fire resources that were in there affecting those rescues and attempting to protect what structures they could in Big Basin actually got their escape route cut off and were trapped in here for a significant period of time before they could exit safely. So that kind of just gives you a realization of what those guys were dealing with inside Big Basin State Park as that fire continued to move down out of the park towards Bonnie Doon, Boulder Creek, and the Last Chance area. This is just a picture of some of those resources that were pulled off the Warnella fire to go up into Last Chance to help protect some of those residents up there. This picture was taken around 2 a.m. In the Last Chance community on the early morning of the 19th. So early on the morning of the 19th, our CAL FIRE incident management team, they had arrived on late afternoon on the 18th. They were out doing some engagement with our operational folks, getting the lay of the land, kind of figuring out how the organizational structure had been set up. And at 0800 on the 19th, our incident command team actually took command of the fire post-briefing. That day, we were getting reports of spot fires in advance of 6 miles ahead of the main fire. That day, the fire had consumed more than 43,000 acres between the morning of the 18th and the morning of the 19th. A significant fire progression that occurred in that 24-hour period. Nothing that we've ever seen in Santa Cruz or San Mateo County in the 100 years of recorded fire history that we have. Next slide here. I just wanted to show a camera. This is a camera view of a alert wildfire camera that is located up in the Bonnie Doon area up off of Patrick Drive. And I just want to note this was a good depiction of what occurred and when it occurred. So this was on the 19th at about 11:22 at night. And that was severe fire activity that was occurring in and around that area. So this is just a picture of that map with that fire growth that we had from the 18th to the 19th. As you can see, it grew 43,566 acres in that 24-hour period. This is just a visual of that fire growth that occurred. This was taken the morning of the 20th. And you can see that fire was still progressing to the south, moving through the area of Bonnie Doon and Swanton area. So by this point, numerous evacuation orders were in effect in both San Mateo and Santa Cruz County. And between the 18th and the 22nd, there was over 77,000 residents that were ordered to evacuate. That was a monumental task for the Sheriff's Department to undertake in both counties, and to only walk away with only one fatality based on how fast this fire progressed is a testament to the sheriff's hard work in getting people notified. The next photo is a couple progression photos that we'll show you here. This was the basically the morning of the 20th. We started to see a little bit slowing of the progression. We only had 15,000 acres that day. On the 21st, you'll see that our progression was only 11,000 acres. And then on the 22nd, you can see our progression had been reduced significantly to the point of about 4,178 acres. And that sounds like a small amount in comparison, but that was still a pretty significant growth. But one of the key elements was in that slowing of the progression was we were actually starting to get resources coming in, which will be talked about just here briefly by Chief Armstrong. I wanted to show this. This is a progression map that we had. It's automated, so it's going to basically start from when the first lightning strikes and then run through almost to the end of the fire. So it'll be just a brief second here. So as you see the red dots, those are the areas where the lightning strikes occurred. And then you'll see as the fires grow over the days, the progression map will come up underneath it. So as you can see, those last few days of it from the 26th to the 28th pretty much had a little to no progression at all. I wanted to just show you this progression map as well. This is from our evacuation management platform that we use Zonehaven for during the fires. This will kind of give you a depiction of when the evacuations occurred, but also it will show the fire progression underneath the evacuation notices. So the different colors you're seeing here, the red is obviously the evacuated areas, the yellow is warnings, and the green is actually when we did the repopulation towards, once it was safe to allow folks to go back into those areas, both infrastructure was replaced and the community area was made safe for the public to re-enter. It took some time to get that repopulation done in coordination with all of our counterparts in PG&E and all of our communications folks to get all that infrastructure back in place for the community. So as you can see, it took a little bit while. Here we are all the way to the 19th, the 20th of September, and we still had folks that were out of their homes. Even past the 22nd, we still had folks that were out of the homes, but eventually we got everybody back in to their homes. And currently there's only one zone that is currently still in a mandatory evacuation, and then that is the zone that encompasses Big Basin State Park. At this point, I will turn it back over to Chief Armstrong.
All right, thank you, Chief. I just wanted to spend the next couple of minutes talking about the resources that we had assigned to this fire, or lack thereof. And the one thing I want to say right off the bat is, we've heard a lot of that we didn't have enough resources on this fire, and we do not disagree with that one bit. We absolutely agree. Chief Larkin and I will stand right there with you and say that we did not have enough resources on this fire. I already told you about the outstanding orders for over 150 fire engines. That was the bare minimum that we wanted because we knew that there was other things going on. We just weren't getting the folks that we needed. So we agree with you. We aren't here to tell you that no, we had plenty of resources. A couple of other things that some folks might not realize, and I won't play a guessing game or anything. I'll just tell you straight out. CAL FIRE staffs 356 fire engines statewide at its peak of summer, which we were in at this time. But that's 356 fire engines for the entire state. With the amount of fires going on and everything, we can't have all 356 of those fire engines. So we rely on other sources through mutual aid and so forth. So we have heard, that it was, folks say it was, a week before they saw a CAL FIRE engine and so forth. And that might be true. Because they might not just been on your area of the fire, but all of those resources that were on the fire were ordered through our structure. A couple of things on this graph to note. Number one, so you have the acreage, the containment, and the total number of folks assigned per day. You notice in that middle column on containment that we didn't get any containment until at least, not official on the map, until it hit 5% on the 22nd, nearly a week in. That was because Chief Larkin previously told you all, we have 3 priorities on every single incident. Those priorities never change. They're the same on the smallest fire to the largest fire. It's life safety first, before property, and before environment. When there's folks in the area of the fire, we can't get out of that life safety mode. So we were, 1, short on resources, but 2, as long as we had folks in the area of the fire that we had to account for, made things very difficult to protect homes. Hard as we would try and everything, we had to work around those folks and get them out of the area. So it just made things a little difficult. Um, Another thing to note here is all we have the total personnel assigned column there. That's all the people assigned to the fire. So there's some numbers in there that those are the support folks. Those are the mechanics, the people in camp, keeping this fire moving forward and so forth. So those aren't necessarily all line personnel. We were totally strapped for people actually on the fire. I mentioned mutual aid. So we had, like I said, we had put out for all of our volunteer companies to staff whatever equipment they could. We did have engagement from all 5 of our volunteer companies. We pretty much completely taxed Santa Cruz County's local government agencies, our city and fire district cooperators, to the point that evening on the 18th, when this thing was burning out of control and we were taking everything that we could, I was getting calls from, because we had cities that we had taken all of their fire engines and we had to get something back to take care of the medical aids that still happen in those cities. I mentioned the need for mutual aid from all over California. With CAL FIRE only having 356 fire engines, we have to get fire engines from other municipalities and other agencies. And that all takes a little bit of time. It's unfortunate. We know we want it here right now. We wanted firefighters by the thousands and they were trickling in by the tens, or sometimes if we were lucky by the hundreds over the course of a day. It just takes a day or two for that reflex sometimes. By the end of this incident, I know we didn't have them when we needed them, but by the end of the incident, we had resources from the National Guard. We had resources from all over the US, from as far as New Jersey. So like I say, you can't get firefighters from New Jersey to a fire in Santa Cruz in a day. It just takes some time, unfortunately. I think that's it on that, Chief. If you can move to the next slide. So one thing I want to talk about is the resource allocation and kind of what we're in competition with. So here's a snapshot of all the fires. This is on August 23rd, and it's just because it was the only graphic of this that we could find. But if you look at the start date on a lot of those fires listed, they were all about the same time as ours. They were, August 16th, 17th, or before. So these are all those fires that are out there. And what happens at the statewide level and trickling up to the national level is there's a daily coordination call that happens where all these sizable fires have sent in our resource summaries. And there's a number of factors in there, from the size to the threat potential, number of structures threatened and so forth. And there's a very defined ranking, basically grading process that those go through to determine which fires are going to get or the highest priorities. So you see all these fires going throughout the state. One of those fires ended up being 1 million acres by the time it was done. It was burned at the same time as ours, first 1 million acre fire in California history. So we were in steep competition for resources. I do want to, Chief, if you can go to the next slide. So from the first 3 days of the fire, based on that grading criteria, we were the 3rd priority in the state for resources. It wasn't until the fire blew up that we became the #1 priority. But I did want to share with you folks just this graphic, and I'll explain kind of what it is. This is our fire, the CZU August lightning fire, in that top row. Below it is the Santa Clara lightning complex that was burning just east of us in Santa Clara County. The row below that is the LNU lightning complex. That was in CAL FIRE's Sonoma Lake Napa unit in the North Bay area. Mainly, I believe, in Sonoma County that fire was going. And then we had the river fire, which was in Monterey, just to the south of us. And this is just a daily resource count. And so, like I already told you all, we agree, we did not have the resources that we needed, that we wanted to truly control these and never get to the point where we got. But on that day, on the 16th, the first day, we were guesstimating about 300 acres what we had. We had a bulldozer, 20 engines, 4 crews, and a couple of water tenders. If you go down to that river fire in Monterey that day, they had almost 7 times the acreage that we did, but we still managed to get 5 more fire engines than them, same number of crews, and that was happening in a populated area as well. If you go forward to the 17th, we were sitting at 861 acres. We had 20 fire engines that day, 2 fire crews, 2 helicopters, and 3 water tenders. Santa Clara, just to the east of us, their fire was nearly 4 times the size, and we had 4 times the number of fire engines. We had a couple of helicopters, they had none. They have a helicopter in their unit, and they couldn't even have it because it was being utilized elsewhere. Fast forward past the 18th, that was the day that everything blew up. And if you look down that column for the 19th, our fire isn't the only one that blew up that day. That was a significant pattern that came through, and everybody's fires increased exponentially. So while we went to nearly 50,000 acres, that fire next door in Santa Clara went to 102,000 acres. We still managed to get 3 times the number of bulldozers than them, twice the number of fire engines, a couple more hand crews, and a lot more helicopters. Looking down at that fire in Sonoma Lake Napa at 124,000 acres, they hadn't even begun to report on that fire until that day because they were managing it locally. They have a much larger unit than us, and it grew so exponentially that then they started reporting. But if you look, their fire was 75,000 acres more than ours. We had more bulldozers, same number of engines. We had twice as many crews. So like I say, we did not have what we needed to. Absolutely agree, 100%. But in the grand scheme of things, sitting in that priority list, it's amazing that we were getting what we got. And with that, that's really all that I have on the resource allocation. And I'll send it back to you, Chief.
Okay, thanks, Chief Armstrong. So kind of getting ready here to wrap up a little bit. So just to kind of summarize some of the events during this incident, information was very important to make sure that we got that out. During this incident, we sent out 112 informational releases throughout the incident. We were holding 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. news briefings. We were trying to get as much information out to the public as we possibly could. In the early days, we just did not have the resources to allocate to that type of media blitz. And plus the fires were relatively small in nature, but as that grew and the team got here, we were able to put that information together. We did have 1 civilian fatality in Last Chance, which was an unfortunate circumstance of this fire. We did evacuate 77,000 people. And as we said from the very beginning, we have 3 priorities: life, property, and the environment. And due to our lack of resources, number 1 priority was get people out of the way of this fire as it progressed. And I think the evacuation of those 77,000 people was our number 1 priority of this incident, was to get people out of harm's way. Our final acreage for this fire was 86,509 acres. 63,754 of those acres were in Santa Cruz County, and 22,755 of those were in San Mateo County. We unfortunately had 1,490 structures destroyed in this fire, 1,431 of those in Santa Cruz County, and of that, 911 of those were single-family residences. At the peak of the incident, we had over 2,400 firefighters. That was a peak. It didn't last very long because as we started to gain containment, other fires were breaking out in the state, as you saw in the graph that Chief Armstrong showed. And we were having to actually release resources as we started to gain containment, and we could make things available to go elsewhere in the state. But we were confident, and the team was confident, that we had adequate resources to keep the fire from growing any larger than it had already grown. This was the largest fire in Santa Cruz history. As I had mentioned early in the incident, that this was a historic event, and I hope we never have to have another fire any bigger than what we've already had. During this fire, we had a lot of our infrastructure was destroyed. We had multiple bridges in the county that was destroyed. I know several bridges out on Swanton were impacted, as well as you had the utilities. and everything else, including drinking water, potable water out on the coast that were destroyed in these fires. And that infrastructure is still being worked on to get it fully back operational. We remained on this incident for months, and we continue to go out when we do have problem areas. To this day, we still, in January, when we had the wind event that came through, we did have a few spots that flared back up that were well in the interior of the fire, but that's just the type of fuels that we have. We have these heavy fuels that can continue to burn for long periods of time. And obviously, we haven't gotten a substantial amount of rain, which could be problematic moving into the next fire season. The cost of this fire is over $68 million over the period of this fire. And one of the big things is that I want to preface is, we exhausted every available resource that we had available to us. I am the state OES operational area coordinator for Santa Cruz County. And during this period of time, we were reaching out to our neighbors to each of the counties next to us and asking them if there was any way they could provide us any additional resources. And several of them were able to provide us a specific number of resources for a limited period of time. And we would utilize those resources and then we would need to give them back as they had needs for them as well in their counties. So, we totally exhausted all those assets that were available to us. This was just an aerial photo that we had been able to take from a helicopter on a flight we had, kind of showing the aftermath of what this fire did. This was a heavily forested area, redwood, conifer, a lot of different fuel types in there, pines and different species throughout that whole entire area, from the Butano all the way down to the lower end of Bonnie Doon. So this was just a picture showing what it looked like from an aerial footage of the just devastation that occurred from this fire. So getting into our lessons learned from this fire. So one of the things that we looked at very, very closely is our fuel conditions. So our fuel conditions have never presented us with this type of fire condition that we experienced during the CZU lightning complex. It's been known that fires just don't grow to large sizes here in our coastal unit. In around the state, San Mateo and Santa Cruz counties were deemed the asbestos unit. Nothing burnt here because of the redwood forest and the moisture we had. That has changed drastically, and that's due to years of drought and climate change. And we're having to revisit how we look at those conditions of our fuels and how we address those specific fuel types when we're making decisions on fires. This lightning event, it gave us an opportunity to evaluate our lightning coordination plan. That plan was fully implemented as it was designed, but due to the lack of resources, we weren't unable to actually execute that as the plan was designed. So that is just due to the sheer lack of resources. Typically, in the history of this unit, any lightning events we've ever had, we've always been able to keep the fires very small, 3 to 5 acres. This time around, it was just a different circumstance with the total number of fires that we had to deal with, and then the remoteness of some of those fires. Evacuations, due to the increased changes in our fuel conditions and how the rates of spreads are changing in these fuel types, that fire spread, it just really changed the mindset of how we look at evacuations. Evacuations are going to need to be considered much more in advance and conducted much earlier in an incident when we look at this for future events that may occur, so that we can get folks out there and get folks out of harm's way. Infrastructure failures. With the damage that was caused by the lightning storm that came in here, we had several downdrafts that brought trees down. It took power lines, broken power poles. PG&E was in the midst of trying to get that infrastructure back in place in a lot of parts of the county. But one of the things that wasn't really realized is the impacts that had prior to the fire. When the phone lines and everything are impacted and the power is impacted, those phone lines and that infrastructure are on backup. Even the cable in some areas of the remote areas of the county that have it are on a backup battery system. And those systems fail over time. Not all those systems are being maintained at the level that they should be. And those batteries don't last as long as they probably should. And that hampered our ability to be able to get information out to the public via different methods, either the internet, social media, or other platforms such as our reverse 911 system. And it leads into our Code Red, our county reverse 911 system. That system is, it had a limited number of residents that actually went on and actually registered for Code Red to receive those alerts. So that hampered our ability to be able to help get information out to those folks. So this really pushes the issue where we physically have to have folks go out to those residents and actually notify them that they need to evacuate. One of the other issues that came up early in the incident was when we were conducting our reverse 911s, our primary dispatch center, which is Netcom, realized that the reverse 911 system had a throttling on it. They were able to work with the vendor very quickly and get that throttling increased so that we could meet demands. And one thing to take into consideration, our infrastructure within the county, as across the nation, is old and is just deteriorating. And you need to understand that some of that infrastructure, the demands that we've put on it in different methods, can have an effect on how much information flow we can push through those lines that are out there with all the data and everything that we're trying to do on a daily basis. The California Mutual Aid, Fire Mutual Aid system. California has one of the most robust fire mutual aid systems. But in times like these, where you have 12,000 lightning strikes occur in the state, causing 585 fires, and 20 of those becoming major events that you're staffing these fires with anywhere from 2,000 to 8,000 firefighters. As Chief Armstrong said, this year we had a fire that it met all-time history in California. 1 million acres burned in that fire. So it taxed our system to its end. It really depleted that system beyond its capabilities. Our evacuation platform that we utilize, the County of Santa Cruz has an evacuation management platform. It was developed after the Summit, Martin, Travian, and Lockheed fires in 2008, 2009. The version of that platform was used to initiate our evacuations and transition to Zone Haven, which is our new evacuation management platform, midstream in the fire with no issues or delay in evacuations. But what the Zone Haven platform allowed us to do was to have a public-facing side of a system that allows the residents and the community to be able to see what's going on in real time as it's occurring. Those platforms that we used provided for the safe, successful evacuation of 58,000 residents in Santa Cruz County and approximately 19,000 residents in San Mateo County. Moving into our fuel reduction efforts, another lesson learned that we have here is, we have not been able to achieve our goals of fuel reduction. Fuel reduction is a difficult topic here in Santa Cruz County. A lot's been done, but there is a lot more work that needs to be done. And moving forward, this is going to be a monumental task that's going to require a cooperative effort by all, from the residents to all of our community groups, fire safe councils, RCDs, the county, CAL FIRE. Everybody involved is going to have to get in and really push this effort to do better fuel reduction that is responsible. Our individual property owner defensible space inspections, LE 100 inspections. We have a lot of residents here in Santa Cruz County, and I'll be the first one to say is our defensible space inspection program is probably not where it should be. We need to increase that, which we will be doing, but we really need to increase it with a greater emphasis on gathering and gaining compliance from the property owner in that process. It's easy to go out and do a couple inspections, gain some compliance, but we really need to have that defensible space around these structures. So it makes it more defendable when we have resources to defend them, but in the best sense of it, defensible structure is something that can stand alone on its own and would not need to be protected with additional resources. Our fire prevention messaging is another area that we're looking to try to improve. We send out constant messaging. We talk about it at the beginning of fire season, during fire season, but we need to be better at it. We need to get more involved with the communities, to have more community meetings. Now with the invent of and the problems with COVID, here we are, we're doing a virtual meeting that allows everybody to participate at a much greater level. So we need to work at that and do better at that fire prevention messaging. So those were some of our key lessons learned from the fire. One of the elements that we will not be able to overcome is the sheer fact of the lack of resources that impacted our ability to make considerable suppression efforts to contain all of these fires. So that concludes our program for this portion of it. But we will get into an answer and question section here in a minute. I'll be turning it over to Deputy Chief Jonathan Cox to help facilitate that. But before we do that, I just want to make a couple statements here. I've provided here a comments email. It is czufire.questions@fire.ca.gov. If we are not able to get to all of your questions tonight, either through the Q&A or the raise hand function, our Q&A is being recorded for us. We will be able to gather that information and respond back to those folks and answer those questions. And this will also be posted to the Community TV website to be viewed. So it's both being recorded and the Q&A session will also be available there to be able to look back and see on questions versus we'll also be able to send an email to those that ask the questions. In addition, we will be submitting a follow-up survey via email for everybody to add additional information and provide additional feedback. There'll be information in there that is candid, scripted questions about evacuations, how you received them, things like that. But it'll also allow you some areas to where you can actually free type information, comments, or concerns. And lastly, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, my name is Ian Larkin. I'm the unit chief here. I've provided my office contact phone number. If for some reason your question is not answered and you have a desire to speak to me directly, feel free to call that number. If I don't answer, leave a voicemail and I will call you back. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Deputy Chief Jonathan Cox to start our Q&A session.
Thanks, Chief. Thank you, everybody. Now we'll have time to answer questions and answers. You'll be able to ask your question in a couple of different ways. One will be through the Zoom platform by raising your hand. And due to the number of questions that we anticipate, we ask that you limit your question to just one when raising your hand and called upon. We encourage you to use one of the secondary methods if you have additional questions, such as the survey link or the actual email address itself. So first of all, we'll call on people with the raise hand function. If you are dialing in from a phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand. If you're called upon, it will be *6 to mute or unmute. The second option is to click on the question and answer button and write your question in the text box and submit. We'll answer those questions based on the number of votes. So you can vote a question up if there is kind of an overwhelming question that is really on everybody's mind. We'll be alternating between the two, so we'll go between call-in, raised hand questions, as well as the Q&A. Again, if you're unable to get your question answered, you can email CZU firequestions@fire.ca.gov or fill out the survey that will be emailed to you if at the address that you emailed in. Just to note, this is an opportunity to ask questions and get answers. We really ask for professionalism and we will focus on the question. Disruptions are not going to be tolerated, and we'll definitely get back to you an email if that is an easier way to communicate. The survey link will also be made available at the conclusion of the presentation with a link on the actual screen itself. And for those of you who we can't answer your questions tonight, we will follow up with you, and we're sorry that we can't do it. We are limited to 2 hours, concluding at 7:30. So with that, we'll go ahead and start with the raised hand feature questions first, and we will start with Karen Dixon. And Karen, you should be able to speak by unmuting. There you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, hi. Hey, I'm looking at photographs I took on the 16th and 17th of Waddell Fire up on the hill, teeny tiny. And on the evening of the 16th, when I stopped to find out what the plan was, fire engines were all just sitting down at Waddell Creek or at Waddell. She told me to move on, but I was able to talk to somebody who, Janet Webb, who's the president of Big Creek Lumber, and she had told those folks down there that they could get up to that fire with a fire road, and they chose not to. They did actually dump two helicopter loads of water on that before they took the helicopter away. Now, this is the fire, of course, that burned everyone's house on White House Canyon, and everyone, and including my mom and dad's house, my daughter's house, all of my neighbors' houses, the school my dad went to elementary school in 90 years ago, whatever. It burned everything. So I am wondering why, there was no acceptance of any input from people who had know-how on this fire, and why it wasn't put out when it was small instead of burning all of our houses down. I really just want to know who made the decision, like a name. Who made that decision?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I appreciate that, and super sorry to hear about the structural loss. We'll go ahead and provide an answer for that. Chief Armstrong, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Karen, thank you very much for the question. And to echo Chief Cox, sorry for the losses that you and your folks experienced. I don't want to, I'll try to break it down a little bit, and I'll try to first address the part that I can. And I think I saw, did you post a similar question in the written format as well? Oh, you may have already muted. I'll try to kind of take that from the beginning and tell you everything I know about it. So we had resources on that Waddell fire continuously since that 16th when we first put folks on it. We do have a certain, sometimes tactics might not be understood. So we try to, for safety's sake, they need to fight fire directly as much as possible, meaning that they are putting the fire out as they go along the line. So rather than just driving up a road sometimes into an area where they could be quickly burned over, they have to form what's called an anchor point. So we like to start fighting that fire from a known point, which would be down below. As far as answering, I can't answer specifics as far as this road or who told them or any of that. But as far as the resources being pulled off of that fire, I did see that question in the kind of the chat function. Resources were on that fire continuously until they were pulled off because the fire was already in Last Chance. The Waddell fire was not what burned into Last Chance. The resources that were on the hill that were directly on the fire line on the Waddell fire were who was able to look across the and that's who we pulled off to go fight the fire in Last Chance, or attempt to fight the fire in Last Chance. That fire that encroached on Last Chance, we couldn't see at night because that was the 5-14 fire that was coming from within San Mateo County. So that moved from the north where there wasn't anybody on the line, because that was that really rapid fire growth that we saw. I don't think that's going to answer your question in a way that you're happy with, but we did have firefighters on that line continuously until, or at least assigned to that fire, until they had to be pulled off to go to Last Chance. And then that fire was eventually enveloped by the rest of the large body of fire once it made its way that far enough south and west.
All right, next we'll go to Fred Gibbs. Fred, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Are you there, Fred? Go ahead. All right, Fred, last opportunity. Do you have a question? Can you hear us? All right, not hearing Fred, we'll move on to Crystal. Go
Hello,
ahead.
can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. Go ahead.
Yeah, one point I just wanted to point out is the loss of life that we had in Last Chance. The fact that it was only one is solely due to our neighbors looking out for each other. The evac warning was way too late, and I am not here to piss on anybody. I just want to know how this won't happen in the future. I personally evacuated my animals and myself on Monday. By Tuesday morning, was very concerned. By Tuesday afternoon, when I drove the coast from the Waddell fire to the Butano, I flipped out and called my neighborhood and knew what was going to happen. And I'm not a firefighter, so I want some answers about that.
Thanks, Crystal. Chief Larkin, do you want to take that?
Yeah, Crystal, as I pointed out in our lessons learned, we are looking at our fuel types very differently and how we address that specifically as it relates to evacuations. In the future, evacuations, especially in the remote areas of the county, if we do have fires in that area, will be evacuated much earlier, at least notifying the community that, hey, you need to leave. And then it's up to them to make that personal choice whether they stay or leave. So we are working on that to make it a higher priority for us now that we have seen how these fuel types that typically don't burn in this manner are burning. So that's how we're going to address that moving in the future. Last Chance is a remote area, and there's only a certain amount of phone lines that go back into that area, and cell service is pretty bad. So we're going to have to concentrate on doing that on a door-to-door type basis and working with the Sheriff's Department on getting folks out there well in advance to get folks out of there. One thing I can say is we did not expect this fire to burn in the method with the veracity, the intensity, and the speed in which it did when it came out of San Mateo County. It had been progressing. It was putting up, a good column of smoke, but nobody anticipated this fire to burn like that in the fuel types that it was burning in. But thank you for the question. I appreciate that. Hopefully I was able to answer that for you.
All right, next question. We'll go to Joe C. Your hand is raised.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, so real quick questions. My questions are, at what time on Tuesday, August 18th, were evacuation orders for Last Chance first spoke of? And who was in charge of putting the orders into place to evacuate Last Chance?
All right, thank you for your question, Joe. The question was specifically what time on the 18th were the Last Chance evacuations called for and who was responsible? And Chief Larkin?
So if I'm got to recall back to Last Chance on that night on the 18th, I believe those evacuation orders started around the first initial calls that were delivered through the reverse 911 system, I believe were around 9:20 to that area. So those evacuation orders went in around that 9:20, 9:30 period of time. But it does take the Sheriff's Department a little bit to react and get folks out to that area. And the reverse 911 system was probably a little bit ahead of them. So in essence, it was probably closer to 10 o'clock before the sheriff was out there to do any kind of door-to-door on that 18th, late evening on the 18th. And those evacuation orders come from the incident command structure that we have in place. Based on the information that we had, we started making those orders in sequence of where we knew the fire was in relation to those areas. It was a while before we knew that the fire had burnt down to the upper end of last chance.
Chief, if I can just add to that a little bit, as Chief Larkin just mentioned, the fire impacted many of these areas after the sun had gone down and we no longer had aircraft on the fire. And our very first notice of the need for evacuations was basically right around sundown, as that fire started to encroach on the Boulder Creek community. And so that was, we were basically at the point there in the evening hours. Remember also, I'm going to backpedal just 1 second and say that the vast majority of the firefighters that we had on the line that night of the 18th, we had a couple of folks down on the Warinella, just kind of buttoning that one up. We had some folks on the Waddell fire there on the coast. The rest of the firefighters were in the sticks. They were back off roads that they had to cut their way into in San Mateo County. And that fire outran them. And they didn't, for lack of a better, we didn't know where that edge of the fire was, being the nighttime hours, until it started to impact that Boulder Creek area. At that point, it is the drive time to drive off of that fire line and basically do a big roundabout to get into Boulder Creek and Bonnie Doon and these other populated areas to actually get back on that fire's edge. So, I mean, it was a significant haul just to be able to move those folks. So in going back to what Chief was mentioning, we were at that point not knowing where exactly that fire threat was, because that fire was moving so fast through the forest, until we were getting the call that, hey, the fire is here. And while we were focusing on that fire encroaching on Boulder Creek and getting into Bonnie Doon, was when we got our first reports there about the fire was actually encroaching on that on the basically the far north end of Last Chance. It was kind of in intelligence, a lack of gaining enough intelligence on where exactly that fire was in those nighttime hours.
All right, we will go next to our first upvoted question, and that is about from Brian Dean. The question is, can we get information for all of the backfires set?
Yeah, Chief Cox, I'll take that question. We're not going to comment on any of the backfires that may have been set or allegedly were set. We do have a couple complaints that have been filed, and we are investigating those as we speak. So I really don't have anything to comment on that. What I can say is fire as a tool for us in the essence of fighting fire with fire. There are times where backfires are set in both an offensive and defensive manner. So we're looking into the questions that have been asked in relation to those. And when we have more definitive answers on that, we'll be able to provide additional information. But at this time, we have no additional information we can provide.
All right, our next question is from Chris. There were many neighborhood fire brigades that were very successful saving many homes. They were told by CAL FIRE to leave the area because it was unsafe. However, they remained. My concern as a public health nurse is that my neighbors have no trust for CAL FIRE because of this fire. How is CAL FIRE going to repair trust in the community so that lives are not endangered in the future if there is a really unsafe fire?
So I'll take that one, Chief Cox. A lot of folks did stay. A lot of folks saved homes. I applaud them for their efforts in that essence. But what I can say is, the trust of CAL FIRE. We had an extraordinary event that occurred here. 12,000 lightning strikes, 585 fires in the state. 24 of those are major fires. Our entire state resource allocation through the mutual aid system is drawn down to its absolute bare minimums. We committed every resource that we had available to us, both locally as well as using our mutual aid partners in our neighboring counties that would give us whatever we could beg and borrow from them to help us in this event. What I can say is we dodged a bullet. The community dodged a bullet. Those people that stayed, you know what? A lot of those are retired firefighters or professional firefighters that are trained to do this kind of work. But if you don't have the tools to do the work, that can be very dangerous. And we averted a weather pattern that was predicted to come through. I believe it was on the 20th or the 21st. It may have been the 22nd now. I can't remember. That was supposed to bring us significant winds and potentially thunderstorms to the area, which can create downdrafts that can blow a fire out and blow it up to where it could have been just like the night of the 18th into the 19th, where we had this extreme fire behavior with rapid runs that if people were in that area, it would have killed them. So what I can say is we are going to do our best to avert this from ever happening again, but I can't guarantee that's going to happen. If we have 12,000 lightning strikes come through this next fire season, I don't have a guarantee that we're going to be able to get resources here to protect us to the level that we would need to suppress the fire. So we're going to do our damnedest to try to do that, but I can't guarantee that that's going to happen. So what I can say is for those, do your defensible space, make your home defendable, a standalone structure, and leave. Grab the belongings that you can, leave the structure, and let us get in and do what we can with the resources we have available. We had several folks that were in and around different areas of the community that decided to stay that due to circumstances, we're pulling our resources away from perimeter control where they would have to go deal with something that was really not a significant event and it really had minimal threat to anything. So it's very troublesome to me that folks would do that. But what I can say is some of the folks that stayed did a great job. You saved structures. We got lucky this time. Next time, we may not be so lucky.
All right, that next question from Matthew Kaufman. When will we all agree that defensible space only matters if fire crews will come defend? And since they won't in a fire like this, we need to switch to either houses that can protect themselves or we'll just watch them burn. I can't tell you how many thousands I spent on defensible space only to watch on video as crews left my neighborhood and let it burn.
Chief, I'll comment on that if you don't mind. And Matthew, thank you for the question. I'd have to say that 9 times out of 10, defensible space does an amazing job, if not more than, if not 99 times out of 100. And if this were the usual small initial attack fire that had started in your neighborhood, that we had a full wildland response responding to, that defensible space would do worlds for you. Because it would give those crews that were dedicated to just that small neighborhood, the chance to really make a great effort and a great save on your property. I'm sorry, the question just disappeared, so I'm going to have to kind of go off memory here. But as far as folks coming into the neighborhood and leaving, one, I can tell you 100% there was no let it burn policy. There wasn't a strategy of that or a mindset of that by any means. What we do get in situations, extraordinary situations like this, and I'm very sorry for your loss and the unfortunate circumstances, but I know we sound like a broken record and I'm sorry for that, but with the sheer lack of resources that we had, we do have to fall back in some respect on the greatest possibility of good for those resources. So there may have been resources patrolling that area, waiting for a fire to pop up in that area that they could easily contain. And if that wasn't a possibility, if there was just one engine that was available to patrol there, either one, by the time fire got into your neighborhood, it was maybe it was too much for the limited number of resources. The other thing is we're typically those resources are going to gravitate to where they can do the most good, to where 1 or 2 engines can make it stand and save an entire street. So I know that's not what you want to hear, and I'm sorry for your loss. But there's the defensible space has proven itself time and time again. These were extraordinary circumstances, and some that just doesn't matter how it seems like you could have 100 feet of defensible space. If something lands just perfect, you could still be threatened. So sorry about that.
All right, next question from Blue Foreman. Is there any way to gauge the likelihood of another devastating fire of this magnitude in the near future? Some people say in another 100 years. But I see about 100 million dead trees that look like ginormous kindling piles throughout Bonnie Doon. How should we realistically plan at this point?
Yeah, I can take that one. That's a really good question, and I appreciate it, and I thank you for that question. What I can say is, this fire did not burn completely and fully clean through the entire area of Bonnie Doon. There is a tremendous amount of fuel left in Bonnie Doon that will carry fire. Even during the fire, we had those concerns. As I stated, if that weather event would have materialized and we would have got downdrafts, that there was enough fuel that we would have had, a significant issue in Bonnie Doon all over again, even though the fire had made its first run through there. So you're absolutely right. I know the county is addressing some of those issues with some of the down stockpiled fuel in that recovery phase. And I also know that PG&E is dealing with some of the down trees that they've done in the right-of-way clearances as we move forward. But what I will say is, defensible space is a key element, and reducing fuels is one of our goals is to get better at that and get more involved in the community to do that. I want to point out, Upper Empire Grade near Crest Christmas Tree Ranch, there's a shaded fuel break that was put in there a few years back. And that shaded fuel break, if you drive into that area, you can see where the intensity of that fire was lessened when it burnt through that shaded fuel break. So, doing that kind of work and reducing those fuels is going to be a key indicator of that. But it's going to take, a lot of effort and a lot of funding to be able to do that fuels mitigation that you referenced in your question. So I hope I was able to answer that.
All right, next question is from Holiday Smith. What can we do to advocate for greater resources for CAL FIRE? Clearly, the current resources are inadequate given the increasingly dangerous conditions.
I was really hoping that Chief Larkin was going to take this one because I could answer this one for way too long. Holiday, thank you for the question, and I will ask Chief Larkin to weigh in a little bit. Something that we didn't really, CAL FIRE, you kind of hit the nail on the head, hurting a little bit for resources. We got hit pretty hard this last year due to COVID-19 and budget cuts. We were slated to add some 500 positions this last year in the governor's budget, and all that was cut just due to the projected budget for shortfall. 2020 was hard for everything. We have CAL FIRE through a cooperative effort with CDCR, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. We're slated for 198 fire crews statewide. Those are low-risk offender inmates that are led by CAL FIRE captains. Of those 198, due to depopulation of prisons, early releases, and other COVID struggles, we were down to less than 90 of those 190 fire crews at the time of this fire. And so the states had to get pretty creative. We hire back extra firefighters and put together firefighter hand crews rather than having those inmate crews. We're entering into new cooperative agreements with the California Conservation Corps and the California National Guard to staff those fire crews. So it's not for lack of trying. We're definitely trying to increase staffing at all times. We'd like to see double what we have. Chief can speak kind of to more of the history going back to budget cuts in the early 90s. I forget how many fire engines we had at that time, but we're just struggling to get back up to a total of 400 in the state. So we thank you for your support and the question. I'm gonna give it back to Chief, what you can do locally to advocate for more CAL FIRE resources.
Yeah, I can just give you a little history on it, and I'll try to make it quick so we don't waste too much time on it. But you know, in the early 90s, CAL FIRE took a significant budget reduction, which was a reduction ultimately in resources. Here, just locally in the San Mateo-Santa Cruz unit, we lost 3 fire engines and a bulldozer at that point. Just recently, in the last 2 years, we were able to get allocated funding back to replace one of those engines. So we're back to 13 engines where we used to be at 15 engines in this unit. So the allocation of resources, that's a legislative act. We are funded through the state's budget. So that would be a legislative act to get additional funding for that. You know, when there's no fires, we have our mutual aid system is robust. I know Chief Armstrong alluded to this earlier. You know, I'll use the Lockheed fire. I was the initial attack IC on that fire. The next morning when I rolled in to give the operational briefing that morning, you know, I had almost 800 firefighters at briefing that morning. Within 2 days, we had 1,500 firefighters fighting that fire. Here, we barely met 1,500 6-7 days into the fire, and we did a max of 2,400 at the peak of the incident, which was, you know, I think it was 8 or 10 days into the fire. So it comes down to the sheer supply and demand statewide. So that advocacy, to really answer your question, rolls back to getting to the legislature to help push that agenda for budget increases.
All right, we'll switch back to our participants with the raised hands and see if we can answer some more of those questions. And we'll go ahead and start off with Sophie.
Hi, yes. Hi everyone. Thank you for taking the time to answer the questions. And I know there's a lot of tough questions that you're trying to answer. Everything outside of my property thankfully didn't burn. Everything probably 5 feet outside of my property burned. Everything in my backyard, driveway, we just moved in, boxes are burned. My backyard basically is a forest. So there are dead leaves and trees that is outside my property everywhere. What is the plan to clear out all of this fuel before the next fire season? Because I've already spent about $10,000 of my money to clear out as much as I can on my property, but I cannot clear the entire forest that's burned behind my house. I'm only 1 mile north of the town in Boulder Creek, off of 236. So there's a lot of burned trees on the hill in front of me and behind me. So what is the plan to clear all of this fuel before the next fire season comes? Because what if, you know, the other side of Highway 9 burns and the fire comes this way, everything's gonna go up. The whole town's gonna go up if it's not cleared. I would like to know what your plan is to clear that.
So Sophie, Chief Cox, I'll take this question. Sophie, I appreciate the question and thanks for that. It really comes down to who is the owner of the property that is adjacent to you. So that property owner is responsible for clearing that property. So I would assume that you're backing up to some type of public land based on your question. So if that's the case, working with that property owner to clear that property, and some of that can come with grant money in a larger project, maybe with your entire community getting involved with fire safe councils, with CAL FIRE, your local fire protection district, to work on you know, getting that fuel reduction done. So our specific plan to your specific question really relates back to you know, who's that property owner and what can we do to assist you in getting that property cleared for your entire community as a preemptive manner. So it might be that we need to take your question offline. Hopefully there's an email that was attached to your question, or if you can email in through the survey, we might be able to get some additional information to you for that.
All right, next we will go to Claire Weber. You will be unmuted.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. My question is also about next summer on White House Canyon Road. We've had a lot of like medium burn, so we have a lot of live oaks that have been fried by the fire, but they're dead, but they have all their leaves. And I wanted to know, like the fire risk is there. but is it increased because we're in a burn area, or is it decreased? Because I'm seeing on one hand that there is more dried dead trees, but on the other hand, the ridges have been cleared of all fuels, so that would limit any risk of fire jumping to the canyon. What is your experience?
Chief Cox, I can take this. Claire, so appreciate the question and thank you. Those dead trees that are there, those oaks, that is fuel. What really is going to be a key element of that is what ground fuels are around that area that could potentially carry fuel to that dead fuel. So it's going to be important to make sure that those areas are clear of that ground fuel, so that fire doesn't have the ability to get in and start those dead fuels, which become more receptive because they're drying out much faster because they're dead. So it's really going to be incumbent on making sure that that area is clear, the roadway is clear, and that you keep those ladder fuels and those ground fuels out from around all that dead vegetation.
All right, next question, we'll go to Bob Burlage. Bob?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. I lost my home on August 20th and probably 90% of my possessions. I personally knew the individual who died in that fire. I want to thank you for your presentation, but it was also extremely difficult to relive all of that. I just turned 70 and I hope I never have to go through anything like that with what's left of my life. I guess I have a question for Chief Larkin. I have a number of comments and potential suggestions moving forward. And I have some comments particularly with respect to the slide that said lessons learned. Chief Larkin, at the beginning of the presentation, said that this was not to be an after incident review. And my question to Chief Larkin is, will there be such a thing? And what will that look like? And what kind of information will be collected? And when will that happen? And will the public have an opportunity to participate in that? And lastly, it's my 48th year in the forest products industry and dealing with forestry issues. And I just want to say, if there's a single take-home message in all of this, here on the Central Coast, it's such a small area compared to forest land elsewhere in the world. And the Santa Cruz County Grand Jury pointed out that we have the highest percentage of wildland urban interface. And I think the take-home message to all of us is, if there's a fire, whether it's in a crown or if it's just creeping along in understory, we all have to find a way to take that more seriously and find an instantaneous response to fires in this area. Because if this fire did nothing else, it proved to us that just because the fires are creeping along on the ground doesn't mean it's going to blow up on the entire geography in a nanosecond.
Yeah, Bob, thank you for your question. And in relation to two parts of that is your last statement there. You're absolutely right. Typically in Santa Cruz County and even in San Mateo County, we tend to keep our fires very small in size and acreage. But as we're all well aware, we live in a forested area that has no real fire history in the last 100 years of recorded fire history. So our fires take a little while to fully suppress because we're dealing with anywhere from a foot to sometimes 3 to 4 feet of duff that we have to get in and mop up. So in relation to that, we've done a very good job over the years of trying to keep our fires small. We've had some very large fires. The Lockheed was just under 8,000 acres. The Summit Fire was 4,000 acres. So this county has the potential for large loss devastating fires. But typically, because of our weather pattern and the great fuel moisture recovery we get with the average rainfall of sometimes upwards of 100 inches a year, it's helpful. But that has lessened with that drought that we spoke about earlier, and the change in our climate and how our fuel moistures are dropping drastically and they're not recovering. I'm nervous about this coming fire season. We have not seen the significant recovery in our fuel moistures to date, and that's due to the lack of rain that we have. So it's going to be a nerve-wracking year as we move forward into fire season. But I really want to get back to your first question about the after-action review. You're absolutely right. This is not meant to be an after-action review. And is a CAL FIRE going to do an after-action review? And my answer to you is the local unit is not doing an after-action review of this incident. We went back, we looked at some of the key elements that we felt were contributing factors to this fire. And our one key element and factor was the sheer lack of resources. So doing a full after-action review based on that specifically really isn't going to generate any change in what is there, other than there was a total dynamic that drained the available resources down to minimum drawdown level statewide, to where we had to enact EMAC to go for resources that are out of state between getting those additional resources here. So I believe, I don't know if Michael Beaton would like to speak to it, but I think the county was talking about the potential for a after action review, but I would have to defer to them to determine if that is the case. Michael, do you want to take that?
Yeah, thank you, Chief. And I apologize for your property and your house burning down. For the County of Santa Cruz, I'm Michael Beaton. I'm the Director of General Services and the EOC Director during the incident of the CZU Lightning Complex fire. The county is in the process of developing a strategy to do and continue to do an after-action review for the county, which includes a survey that we're asking for folks after the end of this call to submit data into. We'll start collecting. It is an ongoing after-action. We plan on having an actionable report sometime in May with the finalized report, I believe, about 9 months after. As you know, these take time. Everything that we learn from everybody on this call, we take it as an actionable item, and we actually start incorporating it into our plans, including our upcoming fire. So I hope that helps answer the question with a little bit off of what Chief Larkin identified.
All right, thank you. Next, we'll go to Alan Lind.
Hello, and thank you very much for taking my call. And I would really like to thank you and your crews. From what I saw of the difficulty of this fire, it's a miracle that there wasn't more loss of life and that even more homes weren't lost. So as near as I could tell, you guys did more than could be expected with fewer resources than you needed. But looking ahead, there is one question I have. It seems to me these fires are to some degree unfightable in the current situation because there just aren't decent fire breaks in these mountains. But there could be, it seems to me. Each and every road, each and every driveway could have a shaded fuel break cut back 50 feet on either side. That would result in a 100-foot wide fuel break, carving this mountain up into portions that might actually be defensible. In your opinion, would that be useful if the residents here could work toward, on their own properties, 100-foot wide fuel breaks spanning all the roads and driveways?
Thanks for your question, Alan. I'll leave that to either Chief Armstrong or Chief Larkin.
Yeah, Alan, thank you for your question. I appreciate it. And, you're absolutely right. We can do more. And, one of the topics in our lessons learned, I talked about that defensible space. And, that's one of those is creating that defensible space. And I also talked about the shaded fuel break projects that we have been engaged in parts of the county, such as up on Empire Grade, that had a an impact on reducing the fire intensity as it burnt through that area. So you're absolutely right. There needs to be more effort and put forward for that that type of fuel work being done. I'm entering my 33rd year in the fire service, and I can tell you when I worked in this unit as a seasonal firefighter back in 1990 and 91, we had much better fuel breaks in this county. I recall as a young firefighter going out on the engine company and doing work on the fuel breaks, making sure the culverts were clean, and doing brush trimming to make sure that they were passable by the fire engines, and that we reduce those ladder fuels. And then they would come back out in the wintertime and take the piles that we had created, and they would burn them to reduce that fuel even more. We used to do a lot more prescribed burning in Big Basin State Park back in those days as well. I know I came back to this unit in 2004, and one of my primary things was when I promoted to battalion chief was to implore the ability to try to use fire as a tool for us and do more prescribed burns. And I've been an advocate of that ever since till this day. We still burn more acres in this unit than we have in probably the last 30 to 40 years in totality. So I totally agree. We need to have a better process in place, working with our cooperative folks as our fire safe councils, our RCDs, looking for grant funding, because all this type of work takes money and it takes people. And there's just not enough of that available to go around without that extra work being put forward. But thank you for your question.
Chief, if I may, just as a side note of that, besides taking people and money, it also takes time. And we have a finite amount of staff. And as the fire season has grown from a fire season that was 5 to 6 months here in the local area, where those resources were able to focus on nothing but fuel reduction in the winter, that fire season has now grown to be, we didn't separate our last seasonals, or our seasonal firefighters, until December this year, and we're going to be looking to rehire them in just a couple of months. So the fire season has grown to an extent where it hasn't given us much anymore of a fuel reduction season, where we typically got to do a lot of that work, and we're struggling right now to make that work with the growing fire year.
All right, we'll take one more question from a raised hand, and why don't we go to Carol Beth Shannon.
Thank you for taking my question. I appreciate it. And yeah, this really makes me nervous. I'm even more nervous now about the next fire season than I was before. And about 1.5 years ago, we did a fire seminar that CAL FIRE participated in, and Assemblyman Stone's office and McPherson. It was McPherson and J. D. Brown was worked with me in putting it together, and it was very well attended at the Scotts Valley Community Center. We had several hundred people there as well, and CAL FIRE had all their flyers and everything, and they really stressed about defensible space. So after that seminar, and we mailed brochures to everyone in Rolling Woods, Pasatiempo, Woods Cove, Lockwood Lane, all that in this area. And I didn't see a lot of homeowners doing anything on defensible space. So Chief Larkin, I guess, the question is to you, because I would like to know specifically what can be done to have homeowners do a defensible space. I have 3 homeowners right around me that they have done nothing, and I contacted this Scotts Valley Fire Department, and they said, all we can do is drive by. And if we see something in the drive-by, then we can address it, but we can't go onto the property. So specifically, what is it that CAL FIRE is going to do to encourage people to develop a defensible space? That's my question. Thank you.
Carol, thank you for the question. I appreciate it. And you know, that is a good question. You know, I live within the Scotts Valley Fire Protection District, and I know they go out and do defensible space inspections. I know I've had one done on my residence. So I know that's available to the fire district. You know, the specific trying to get somebody to do defensible space is difficult. You know, you may have the best defendable home in the neighborhood, but if your neighbors aren't doing it, a lot of the times it's not going to always work out for everybody in the neighborhood. And, you know, this is a prime example, this fire. There are numerous examples of just that, where you had a house on the left that did not have defensible space that burnt down. The house on the right, you could tell that there was good clearance around it, but it burned down as well, even though they had defensible space. But the house on the right didn't have defensible space, which in turn, the house that was actually had good defensible space and somewhat protected the other house to the right that did not have defensible space, and it's still standing. So there are a lot of examples of exactly what you're doing, what you're saying. So specifically to what CAL FIRE can do, once again, this is really a concerted effort of getting your neighborhood together. Everybody, I mean, if this was not an example of what can happen in this county, I don't know what is. I've been back in this county working here since 2004. I've been through, with the exception of one of the fires, I've been a part of all the major fires that we had, the Summit Fire, the Martin Fire. I was not here for the Trading, but I was here for the Loma, I was here for the Lockheed, and I was here for the CZU Lightning Complex. So I've seen what can occur in this county, and I've been a staunch advocate of expressing that it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when it's going to happen. You know, I expressed our concern about, you know, we're going to really start to enforce our defensible space inspections more greatly, but our local fire protection districts also have, you know, the responsibility to go out and do that in their areas as well. And this will be a topic that I bring up to our county fire chiefs as I sit as a current standing president of that association. I will bring that up, and we will start to try to get that conversation started on what we can do to better support the communities. But I would really reach out to your local fire protection district and push a little bit harder on them to help you in that effort in your community. And I know there's different chipping programs and things that are available. You know, as the county fire chief, you know, we're planning on trying to involve ourselves more in that process as well from the county fire department side in our fuel reduction efforts to help our communities. But in general, that's what CAL FIRE can do. We can help coordinate that. We can help open that conversation and bring them to the table to hopefully be able to get compliance in those communities to make it safer for you all.
All right, so we have a couple minutes left. We have some kind of themes coming out on these questions at the moment. And maybe one we should answer a little bit more is talking about evacuations. A lot of concern about when they were called for and how they were called for. I don't know if we could just give a little bit of information about how evacuations are called for and what the process is and what goes into it.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'd be happy to, Chief, if it's okay, I'd be happy to field that question because I see the one from Julia there in the questions, and Chief can add to this when I'm done. But I answered this a little bit before, but I'll reiterate now. It's not that CAL FIRE wasn't concerned about evacuations, but as I stated before, the three fires that combined to make the large fire burned through miles in those evening hours, literally miles. And as Chief stated before, this burned in a way that no fire has ever burned in Santa Cruz County before. And unfortunately that happened in the evening hours when we can't actually see where that fire's edge was. So, and having to reposition all those resources to actually get to a fire's edge to see what needed to be evacuated. So Like I say, the fire had never burned that way before. It's not that we weren't concerned. We didn't think it would ever burn through 5 or 6 miles in the evening hours that, and kind of catch us running. So there's that end. And then, oh, I'm sorry, the question disappeared again. Like I say, it's not that we weren't concerned. It's just that we did not expect it to go where it did that evening. Nobody would have. And Chief, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I can just elaborate a little bit more on the process and how evacuations are called for. So as I mentioned in our presentation, that on the afternoon of the 18th, we had entered into a unified command structure with the local sheriff's departments in both counties. We had representatives here with us at the command post from both, representing both of the counties. We started our planning process. We had our evacuation management platform out. We were looking at all the zones that we were planning to, start to evacuate if the need arose. And as soon as we got the indication that we had fires spotting the distance that they were spotting, those evacuation notices went into effect immediately. And we were working side by side, hand in hand with the sheriff's department, with our reverse 911 system through NetCom, to get these alerts out as fast as possible and get deputies out on the ground and other law enforcement agencies that were participating. And one thing you got to think to look at in evacuations is a systematic approach to those. If you go out and you try to mass evacuate a large area, especially like the San Lorenzo Valley, if we were to take the entire valley and say, everybody get out, you're going to just have the roads plugged up because they're small, narrow mountain roads. So in a manner, we took a systematic approach and started the most endangered properties and people and started moving them as quickly as possible. As Chief Armstrong said, nobody expected that fire to burn into Last Chance at the rate that it burned into. And as soon as we heard that the fire had reached a certain spot in Last Chance, those orders went out immediately. Hindsight, looking back at it, as I said earlier, based on how our fuels reacted in this fire, we are going to have to look at evacuations much earlier in our processes based on the fuels here. We've lived in an area where we've had fires, but we really haven't been subjected to fires and this type of fuel. A lot of it was redwood forest that burned, and it burnt with extreme intensity and extreme speed as it moved through the crowns of that area. So, but that process is a combination and coordinated effort with the sheriff's department. We make the recommendations, and the sheriff's department actually goes out and actually enforces the evacuation and makes the official order for that to occur. And I don't know if Sheriff Hart had anything you wanted to add to that or not, or if I was able to answer that clearly enough.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chief Larkin. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, I just wanted to say that these evacuation orders they're made with great care, and the program that's being used now is very effective. I just remember a conversation you and I had when that fire was hunkered down in San Mateo, and you and I spoke at about 2 in the afternoon. I think it was the first day of the fire, around the 18th or so. And you said, you felt like that it was okay because it was just sort of nestled down. And then a few hours later, you said, we've never seen anything like this. This thing just took off on us. And I think it has to do with these fuels that you're talking about. But certainly the evacuation of Last Chance, had we had advanced information, we would have been up there. We sent deputies up there. We were met by fire personnel who said, yeah, the fire's coming down. And so we did not get into Last Chance late that evening because the fire was already coming down.
All right. Last kind of thematic question that's come out is really about volunteers and the use of volunteers during fires. A lot of questions around why weren't we working with local volunteer firefighters, and why weren't impromptu volunteers allowed to fight the fire?
Yeah. So, and I see that question from Antonia, and thank you, Antonia. To answer your question, we were working with the local volunteer firefighters. As we stated earlier, there's 5 volunteer companies under Santa Cruz County Fire. that CAL FIRE administers in the county. And there were members from all 5 of those companies engaged in this fire at some point. At one point, when the fire did get into the community of Bonnie Doon, some of those volunteers were caring for their own homes, but we did still have members of all of the other companies kind of ingrained with our own personnel, staffing, equipment, got for at least a week and a half to 2 weeks into this fire. Chief, sorry.
Okay, Chief Cox, I know we're coming up on our 7:30 closeout here. We only had a reserved committee meeting for 2 hours. I want to thank everybody for your participation. The questions that were in the Q&A, we are going to work to try to get the ones that we did not get to answered and provide that feedback. Once again, you can also email the CZU fire questions at fire.ca.gov. Any questions, comments, and as always, you can call my office line, area code 831-335-6700. And we will be sending out a final survey to everybody that registered to participate in the meeting to allow you some additional inputs and answer some questions in that survey. So I just want to thank everybody for participating. Thank you, the panelists, for being here to help answer questions. And with that, we will conclude our meeting. Thank you and good night.